What's wrong with BTS's Jungkook until netizens seem to never get tired of finding fault with him? This question continues to echo every time Jungkook's name again becomes the subject of conversation in the digital public space. In the midst of global achievements, consistent achievements, and an almost flawless professional image, Jungkook is often in a paradoxical position, revered as a world icon, but at the same time overexposed, suspected, and even judged by some netizens for things that often feel trivial. This phenomenon brings up one bitter reality about fame, especially when one reaches a point of popularity as high as BTS's Jungkook. Jungkook is not just a K-pop idol. He is a symbol of a generation, a global face that represents dreams, hard work, and extreme discipline. Since debuting at a very young age, Jungkook grew up under the spotlight of cameras, public judgment, and ever-increasing expectations. His every gesture, his facial expression, his choice of words, even his silence, are often overinterpreted. This is where problems start to arise. When a person is too famous, he is no longer seen as a whole human being, but as an object of public consumption that seems to be obliged to be perfect at all times. Many of the criticisms against Jungkook actually did not depart from real mistakes, but from netizens' subjective interpretations. Some accuse him of being arrogant just because he looks quiet at an event. Some call it changing just because the style of dress or facial expression does not match the expectations of certain fans. Even in some cases, Jungkook was criticized for choosing to remain silent and not respond to rumors. The calm demeanor that should have been seen as maturity was instead twisted into an arrogant accusation. In the age of social media, silence is often considered a mistake. This phenomenon shows how netizens often demand Jungkook to always be present emotionally according to their wishes. Jungkook is expected to always smile, always be friendly, always open, and always explain himself. When he failed to meet one of those expectations, criticism came in droves. In fact, Jungkook is an ordinary human being who has boundaries, fatigue, and the right to keep his personal space. However, this right is often neglected because of his status as a public figure. Pressure on Jungkook also cannot be released from his position as one of the most popular BTS members globally. This extreme popularity brings two sides of the coin. On the one hand, he is loved by millions of fans. On the other hand, it becomes an easy target for those who seek sensations, attention, or simply an emotional outlet. Every little issue involving Jungkook is quickly magnified, disseminated, and twisted into a negative narrative. In a matter of hours, opinions that are not necessarily true can turn into the internet version of truth. Even sadder, criticism of Jungkook is often not based on empathy. Netizens forget that Jungkook began his career as a teenager who had to shoulder great responsibilities. He grew up in a harsh industry, with a tight schedule and not light mental stress. But instead of being appreciated for his mental resilience and consistency, Jungkook continues to be tested by the public who seem to be waiting for his mistakes. It was as if the perfection he had shown so far had to be paid for with relentless judgment. There is also a tendency for some netizens to compare Jungkook to an idealized version of themselves. When Jungkook no longer fits the description, he is considered changed or disappointed. In fact, change is a natural part of human growth. Jungkook is no longer a teenager who just debuted. He is a mature man with views on life, preferences, and ways of expressing himself that may differ from the past. Demanding her to remain the same is a form of denial of her humanity. In the midst of all that, Jungkook chose a relatively quiet path. He rarely responds to criticism head-on. He doesn't often make lengthy clarifications. Instead, he continues to work, create, and show dedication through concrete results. This attitude, ironically, was again misinterpreted by some netizens as indifference. In fact, it could be Jungkook's way of surviving, maintaining his mental health, and protecting himself from endless noise. The question, what's wrong with Jungkook? It ultimately leads to a greater reflection on today's internet culture. Jungkook's fault lies not in his attitude or actions, but rather in the fact that he is too visible, too successful, and too easy to target. In a drama-hungry digital world, Figures like Jungkook are often denied the space to be human. He is forced to carry a symbolic burden that is too heavy for one individual. However, behind all the criticism and accusations, there is one thing that cannot be denied. Jungkook stood up. He kept going, kept working, and kept showing professionalism. Every stage he walked on, every song he sang, became proof that he chose to answer the noise with quality. And perhaps that's where his real strength lies in the end. This question is not just about Jungkook, but about us as spectators. Until when will the public continue to find fault with someone who has given so much? Until when does empathy lose to sensation? BTS's Jungkook may not be perfect, but he's also not as bad as the narrative that some netizens often build. He is just a human being living under the light of a lamp that is too bright, trying to remain himself in the middle of a world that continues to demand more. The pressure that Jungkook was subjected to was further felt when the moral standards and behaviors imposed on him felt unreasonable. A small mistake that, if made by another person, may be forgotten in a matter of hours. It turns into a matter of long debate when it involves his name. A photo, a cut of a video without context, or an anonymous rumor on social media is enough to trigger a wave of accusations. In situations like this, Jungkook is no longer judged by facts, but rather by perceptions built collectively by public opinion that are often emotional and reactive. What is rarely realized, every accusation directed at Jungkook carries a real psychological impact. Behind the grandiose stage and the cheers of fans, there are individuals who must process resentment, false disappointments, and unrealistic expectations. But Jungkook almost never showed the wound to the surface. He chose to endure it in silence, a choice that may not be heroic in the eyes of netizens, but instead shows an emotional maturity that public figures of his age rarely have. Interestingly, the more Jungkook tried to be calm and non-reactive, the more some netizens felt out of control over him. There was a kind of desire from the public to see Jungkook falter, react, or at least defend himself emotionally. When that does not happen, collective frustration arises, which is then vented in the form of continued criticism, as if Jungkook's calmness was a provocation. In fact, it could be that tranquility is his last stronghold to stay sane. Not a few also forget that Jungkook grew up without really experiencing a free youth like most people. From his teens, his life was governed by schedules, exercises, responsibilities, and public expectations. He learns to restrain emotions, hide fatigue, and still look professional in any conditions. So when he chooses to be more closed or keep his distance, it is not a form of arrogance, but a survival mechanism that has been established for a long time. The narrative netizens always find fault with Jungkook also cannot be separated from the increasingly strong cancel culture.